Hi, my name's Megan and welcome to the channel. On this channel, I create a lot of content about Vietnam, and it is one of the few countries that I find myself going back to year after year. But you may have noticed that Vietnam actually gets a lot of hate. People seem to love it or hate it, and many well-known travel bloggers talk about negative experiences that they've had in the country. In today's video, I'll be covering 10 things that either frustrated me, left me feeling pretty uncomfortable, or downright scared me on my first time in Vietnam. Vietnam is so different from Canada, and I honestly just wasn't prepared for the things that I would be seeing or experiencing. The first major adjustment was getting used to walking around the city and then also being comfortable inside of a car or on the back of a motorbike taxi. It looks like absolute chaos with bikes on the sidewalk, cars driving on both sides of the roads. Honestly, it can be very scary if you didn't grow up with it. I was also aware of the high number of accidents, many of which were caused by foreigners that are renting bikes without any riding experience or even on foot crossing the streets and then hesitating. The sidewalks were not very walkable with people driving on them or because of unfinished construction or even large potholes. I saw many people that would be texting while they're driving, and then there was also a lot of drunk driving. It's quite scary to see the state of some of the locals and other tourists that would be getting on their bikes and driving home after a night of drinking. Which brings me right into my next point, which is that there is a heavy drinking culture in Vietnam. The drinking culture turned me off not just because of the driving, but also just in general. Alcohol more often than not leads to poor decisions, rowdiness, and saying things you maybe wouldn't say sober. I try to avoid drinking culture regardless of where I am in the world, and really enjoyed other parts of Southeast Asia like Sri Lanka, where drinking is so highly regulated. Alcohol is just a big part of Vietnamese culture, and I ended up finding it hard to avoid, which made me feel very uncomfortable. When I first moved to Vietnam, I also struggled with getting settled in and then finding a place to live. Many of the apartments I was viewing were low quality, there was a heck of a lot of paperwork involved in actually moving in, and then there was a significant language barrier to overcome. Quick disclaimer here. I understand that the problem is not that the Vietnamese didn't speak English, but that I went to Vietnam without speaking Vietnamese. Regardless of this, there was a significant language barrier that ended up impacting my experience there as a tourist. This, along with pretty much everything on this list of 10 things, is a me problem. The same way that if someone from Vietnam came to Canada, crossed the street, and then ended up getting fined for jaywalking because they didn't cross the road at a designated crosswalk. It's not a problem with Canada, but it is something that would impact that tourist experience. So if you find yourself at this point of the video feeling frustrated by the points I've given so far, you are not going to like the rest of this video, so please save yourself some frustration and just click off now. The combination of the language barrier and then the apartments I was viewing being quite low quality, or some of them still under construction. There's a lot of construction. That's something that has not changed in Da Nang, but it all made it very difficult to find a place and just move in and be settled in. My biggest mistake when looking for an apartment in Da Nang was comparing it back to how simple the process had been when I was in Chiang Mai. Here I now had this language barrier. I was faced with a lot of paperwork, much of which I did not understand, and then also had to put a full month of rent in a cash deposit to the landlord prior to making any rental. It all just felt unnecessarily complex. If you've been to Da Nang recently, you'll know that the language barrier is much less of a concern, but I swear, it was very different 3 years ago. The next thing on my list that I struggled with when I first moved to Da Nang was something I was expecting and was warned about, but didn't quite realize the extent of. That would be the noise. It's never a dull moment. The bar and the karaoke scene is hopping all night, and the motorbikes are also on the move 24/7. Loud music from restaurants as well as residential homes, constant honking, cheering, yelling in conversation. I just felt like I was being constantly stimulated and pulled in all of these different directions, and it was overwhelming and also very difficult to actually get any sleep. After a few weeks of being there, the noise all just kind of blends together into this background hum, and then for sleeping, earplugs. Next would be the lack of safety standards, especially around the construction zones. Construction sites are generally not blocked off, and you will walk right onto one if you aren't paying attention. I've seen parts of buildings under construction just completely collapse, throwing debris onto the road and the sidewalks. Telephone pole wires are also a tangled mess and often just hanging down onto the sidewalk, so they could completely clothesline you if you aren't paying attention. And then, if you aren't looking where you are walking, the sidewalks have big holes in them that you could just walk right into, especially at night, and seriously injure yourself. I don't want to be offensive with this next point, so I'm going to tread lightly here. I struggled with adjusting to different mannerisms around cleanliness in Vietnam. So there are things in Canada that would be considered unacceptable or even rude that were completely normal in Vietnam. For example, putting bare feet up on the table or spitting in public. I was seeing this stuff all around me and I just wasn't used to it. On a similar note was adjusting to the cleanliness of the city in general. There's a lot of pollution and a lot of garbage just on the streets and a lot of strong smells that really turn me off, especially around the local markets. One thing is that while there was a lot of garbage on the street sides, if you go down by the beach and the boardwalk lining the beach, it is completely spotless. This is one of my favorite beaches in the world. I can't believe it's an urban beach. It stretches on for miles and there was no garbage. Something else I wasn't prepared for and found difficult to see was the treatment of animals. It's not uncommon to see many live animals, from chickens to dogs, in tiny little cages thrown on the back of a motorbike. Also, cutting and gutting of animals in preparation to eat them was just publicly out on the street. Now, I spent a summer in Canada working on a chicken farm out west, so I know that we do the same thing and our treatment of animals is not much better than this, but the difference is that it's out of sight. In Vietnam, it's happening so publicly. I also felt quite unwelcome. Again, I was comparing to other countries that I had recently traveled in Southeast Asia. In Sri Lanka, in Myanmar, in Thailand, I was always greeted with a smile and everyone was so friendly. Whether it was genuine or not, I felt very welcome. This was not the case in Vietnam. During my first week, I was upcharged, made fun of, outright ignored, or alternatively being grabbed and yelled at. Queuing in a lineup, whether you were waiting to pay at the local market or you were waiting for the bus, was not a thing. You essentially pushed to the front. I definitely had a victim mentality at the beginning with this like, oh, woe is me, why do they hate me, why are they all treating me this way? It really wasn't about me at all. And if I went into every negotiation or every lineup with my Canadian mentality where if I'm within 2 feet of someone's vicinity, I'm apologizing to them. Oh, excuse me, oh, pardon, sorry, I'm just not gonna get anywhere. I also felt like I had to be constantly on guard for petty crime, theft, and then even harassment. Vietnam is not somewhere where you walk down the sidewalk texting on your phone. I've had several friends that have had their phones grabbed right out of their hand, or even women that have had their purses cut and then stolen by a drive-by motorbike. Pickpocketing is also a problem, and then I also experienced harassment from a drive-by motorbiker on multiple occasions. For all I know, it could have been another foreigner that was on the motorbike. Either way, it still added a negative to what I was considering to be a rough start to my trip. And then beyond petty theft, there are some pretty big tourist scams to look out for. Any destination, especially a tourist destination, is going to have scams. I did a whole video about common scams to look out for, many of which I either experienced myself or knew people that experienced them. One weekend, I was ready to pack my bags and leave. 3 weeks in, I was absolutely loving it. And here I am, 3 years later, still going back there and having made some of the best local connections out of anywhere that I have ever traveled to. I'd love to know in the comments below if you have ever had a bad first impression of a new destination, whether it was from your own lack of planning or maybe your personality just not really jiving with the culture of that location, which is totally fine. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I hope to catch you down in the comment section, as well as back here again for another video next week. Have a good one. Bye.